Alright, so by now you've seen all those videos trying to sell you the best build to take on Elden Ring, or even the best build to take on other players in the Colosseum. It really does seem like an endless slew of Elden Ring build videos. But is it really endless? Exactly how many unique builds can you make in Elden Ring? Let's find out. Okay, so to start off, let me share the basics of character customization. In Elden Ring, the player has access to the following in their loadout. For weapons, there are 308. These include the typical swords, spears, and shields, etc. But this also includes things like torches, staves, and sacred seals. However, this does not include tools like the Wraith Calling Bell. For armor, there are 169 different pieces of head armor, 208 different pieces of chest armor, 108 different pieces of leg armor, and 94 different pieces of hand armor. For talismans, there are 117, and for spells, there are 171. At first glance, it may seem very simple to answer the question of how many different possible builds there are in Elden Ring. All you would have to do is multiply the number of weapons by the number of head, chest, leg, and hand armor pieces, by the number of talismans, by the number of spells, right? Doing this gives us a whopping total of 2,199,046,117,000,000 different combinations of builds in Elden Ring. To put that number in perspective, if you took 1 second to try each of these builds, it would take you over 69 million years. But hold on, if it was that easy, this would be a pretty short video. And as you can see, the player loadout is pretty complicated. In Elden Ring's loadout, you will notice that there are multiple slots per type of equipment that you have. So this would be a good time to define what a build in Elden Ring is. For the purposes of this video, I will be considering a build to be a unique combination of items that you can equip in your inventory. This means that I will be disregarding the level of the character, ultimately for the sake of simplicity. So now that we have that answered, let's look at how many slots there are in the player's equipment loadout. In Elden Ring, the player is given the following slots. A total of 6 weapon slots, however only 3 slots per hand, 1 armor slot for a headpiece, 1 for a chest piece, 1 for leggings, and 1 for your hand armor. A total of 4 talisman slots, 2 arrow slots, 2 bolt slots, 12 slots for your spells, and 16 different item slots. Side note, you'll notice that there seems to be only 10 item slots in the inventory menu, but we have to remember that the player also has a pouch that they can hold up to 6 different items as well. So as you can probably see by now, there will be a bit of math that we have to do in order to find the number of possible builds in Elden Ring. But before we get to that, we need to remember that there are certain restrictions that the game has in terms of what we can and cannot equip under certain circumstances. So let's list some of these restrictions. First of all, the basic restrictions are the number of inventory slots that we have, as stated before. So for example, obviously you cannot equip 4 weapons in the same hand, since you only have 3 weapon slots per hand. Second, there is kind of one restriction on our weapon selection. We cannot equip the same weapon multiple times in the same hand, since it wouldn't really make any difference if a duplicate weapon appeared twice in one hand. If Elden Ring was like previous From Software games where the weapons had durability, then maybe I would allow the same weapon to be equipped in the same hand. It is worth noting though that we can equip the same weapon in the opposite hand, since power stancing exists. Third, you can only equip 1 of each talisman at a time, similar to the weapon restriction. Fourth, there are some talisman combinations that the game does not allow, more on that later. And fifth, you can only equip 1 of each spell at a time, kinda. In Elden Ring, you can equip the same spell more than once, but if you do, the hotbar will only read that you have 1 of that spell equipped. So, with these restrictions in mind, we can now begin to calculate the number of possible builds in Elden Ring. To make this a little easier, we can break this down by type of inventory slot. By figuring out the unique combinations of each inventory type, all we will have to do is multiply each of them together to get our answer of how many unique builds there are. Armor will thankfully be the easiest, since there's only 1 slot per armor type. All we have to do is multiply the number of head armor by the number of chest armor by the number of leg armor by the number of hand armor. However, we have to add 1 to each of these numbers since we have to account for the fact that we can leave armor spaces open. Multiplying these numbers together gives us 367,913,150. Next, we have the weapons. As stated before, there are 308 different weapons. And I lied. Kind of. Weapons have a unique quality to them since you can upgrade them, assign them Ashes of War, and assign different enchantments to them. When accounting for every unique Ash of War, upgrade, and enchantment combination, we actually find that there are over 1.5 million unique weapons in the game. So now that we know how many true unique weapons there are, we can now start to figure out how many different weapon combinations there are in Elden Ring. There are 3 weapon slots assigned to each hand. So that means we only have to find the number of combinations of one hand and then multiply that number by itself, since we have two hands. To do this, we use this nifty combination formula. However, we have to remember that we don't always have to fill each weapon slot. So, to account for this, we are going to have to find the different number of possible combinations for one slot, then for two slots, and then for three slots. Then, we add them all up. This results in 5.84 times 10 to the 17th power. When we multiply this number by itself, since again we have two hands, it comes out to 3.41 times 10 to the 35th power. For talismans, it's a bit like the weapons. I say this because we are going to have to use the same combination formula, split the talisman slots into different groups, and then we will add these four numbers together. This gives us 7,680,856. However, as stated earlier, there are many restrictions on which talismans can be used together. For example, the Shard of Alexander cannot be equipped with the Warrior Jar Shard. From my personal calculations, there are exactly 328,593 of these forbidden groupings of talismans, which means we have to subtract this number from the previous number that we calculated. This gives us 7,352,263 unique combinations of talismans in our loadout when taking into account the number of talisman restrictions. For spells, we need to do something similar to the weapons and the talismans. The only thing we have to remember is that the same spell cannot appear multiple times. So, by splitting the spells into different groups again, this time 12 different groups due to there being 12 maximum spell slots, and using the same combination equation as before for each of the groups, we come to 8.79 times 10 to the 17th power of different combinations of spells. For arrows, bolts, and items, it's more of the same equations that we've been using up to this point. So, rather than bore you with even more math that you didn't ask for, I can simply tell you the different combinations for each of the categories. For arrows, there are 39 different types of them, and we have 2 different slots. So this would make the total number of different combinations of arrows 782. For bolts, there are 24 different types, and we also have 2 slots for them. This means that we have a total of 302 different combinations of bolts. And for usable items, there are a total of 178 of them, and we have 16 different slots. This means that we end up with a total of 2.69 times 10 to the 22 different combinations of usable items. Now that we have all the combinations for all the different equipment types, all we have to do is multiply them all together and we get 5.14 times 10 to the 96th power. This is an astoundingly big number, and it really proves just how big and vast Elden Ring truly is. Just to make things clear, this number is 514, but with 94 zeros at the end of it. To put this number into perspective, the known universe has upwards of approximately 10 to the 82 power number of atoms. This means that the number of possible unique builds in Elden Ring dwarfs the number of atoms in our own universe by nearly 12 orders of magnitude. So, which build are you using next?